Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and sign in? I'm on it. I'm on it right now. Okay, okay. Okay.
Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is 6:02 p.m. on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. All right. What am I doing here? Okay.
Roll call.
Rosa, please.
Sure. Okay, Jessamine Ludwig,
Here.
Lance Shaw,
Here.
Henry Vincent,
I'm here.
and Mike Harvey,
Here.
and Chuck Romberger is absent so far.
Thank you. Do I have to do anything different if he comes in?
It's important that we verbally announce that somebody is either left or been added to the meeting. That way
Okay.
it's picked up on audio. And
All right.
Rosa would note that in the minutes as well.
Okay. Well, then moving on. Any petitions from the public?
None that I've seen.
All right, fantastic. Approval of the minutes. Has everyone looked over them or have any questions or comments? Okay,
I've looked at them, no issues. I move we approve the minutes.
anyone would like to second that?
Sorry, just a quick point of order. Commissioner Harvey obviously wasn't here in October, and we'll need to abstain from that. And then I believe Commissioner Harvey was present for the joint meeting, so you might want to break those out into two separate motions.
Okay, so we can't do the regular staff minutes?
You can do those. Oh, if we have 3 votes for the October minutes, we can break those out. That's the October 21, 2020 minutes. We can break that as a single motion, even though Commissioner Romberger's not here, as long as we have 3 votes. And then we can do a second motion on the joint meeting minutes.
So I heard Lance motion to approve the first bit, the October 21, 2020 minutes. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, so with a second, I call the question that we approve the October 21, 2020 minutes. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously.
And I abstain.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. I haven't had to do any abstaining before, so I'm a
It's a
little
first.
unclear on the rules.
Well, why are we spending all this time getting you all trained up? You're just leaving us.
Experience, John. Come on.
I know.
So, okay, so then let's move on to the joint meeting with council, December 1st, 2020. Everybody read those, okay with it? Okay, great. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the joint meeting.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. So I'll call the question that we approve the joint council meeting from December, or minutes from December 1, 2020. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Great, motion carries. Moving on.
Mhm.
Okay, proposed text amendments. John, you want to talk about this a little?
We are zooming right along. We had, I know people are tired of seeing the same thing over and over, but we are making good forward progress on this, and a decision tonight. We're looking for a decision tonight from our P&Z on this item, which would be a recommendation to council. This is a zoning ordinance amendment to make some adjustments to our zoning ordinance regarding certain types of residential lodging. We did have some comments at the joint meeting, and those minutes, of course, are included in your packet. We did have a few minor edits to that. I don't want to go into too much detail because I know this is a little bit of a reiteration for you. But I'd rather than go into a detailed staff report, I'd just be happy to answer any questions. I did include in your packet a redlined version of the proposed ordinance amendments, and then identified which sections those refer to. The primary change is really getting rid of the definition of boarding house / rooming house. It's an old, outdated definition. Anything that would, if somebody decided they wanted to build something like that today, we would just consider that a small hotel, and it would fall under the hotel requirements and standards. So that's the main change. We also got rid of the definition for motel and essentially combined that into hotel, because there's really no difference. It's transient lodging. We talked about making changes to the bed and breakfast definition and actually changing the number of rooms. Decided to leave that, after discussions at the joint meeting, decided to leave that at 3. We do have at least one bed and breakfast, if not more, in the commercial district that has more than 3 rooms. And the bed and breakfast that's in the commercial district would be treated the same as a hotel. So there's no reason to adjust the bed and breakfast definition for to accommodate something that's in the commercial district. So with that, I'd just be happy to answer any questions. I know there's at least one additional person. Looks like Wendy and Josh are participating in the Zoom call that may have comments. So after commissioner comments and questions, we may want to go to them for questions. I do want to mention that this is a public hearing. So it's important that we accurately state this is a public hearing, and we appreciate and encourage any public testimony. As part of that process, we did advertise in the paper, and we posted the public hearing notice in the three primary locations where we post all of our regular agendas and such. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I open it up to Josh and Wendy, does anyone else have anything to say right now?
Nothing for me.
Nothing for me. Okay. So I'm going to open it up to the public, and Josh and Wendy, do you like to comment on this?
Yes, I believe that this is a good cleanup. This is very positive for our project, and I think in general for the definitions. I agree that the rooming house, boarding house is something that seemed a little antiquated to us, and we are fine with falling under the definition of this transient lodging.
Okay, thanks. Okay, does anybody else have anything before I move on here?
Well-
So do we have a motion to approve resolution 2021-01?
I see a comment from Commissioner Vincent.
Oh, sorry, Henry, I didn't see you.
You're fine. So I'm concerned about, we now have a bed and breakfast definition of 3 rooms. So picking on Andrea, where I think she has 4 or 5,
Right.
just how does this affect her?
C1, she's a hotel.
Yeah, because she's in the C1.
Even if the name of the business is Surgeon's House Bed and Breakfast, she's in C1 and she's a hotel.
Okay, thank you.
And
I
it is,
I thought hotel did not include bed and breakfast.
the definition does not include bed and breakfast, but it's treated, since it's transient lodging, it's treated differently than bed and breakfast in the residential area. So that's the reason I had to put that in there in the definition. So in the residential area, technically you're not allowed to have more than 3 rooms. Now that's in a state of flux right now because of the state law regarding vacation rentals. But if that ever changes, this bed and breakfast in the residential area would be restricted to 3 rooms. We did clean up the definition on bed and breakfast that related to, let me get it in front of me here. The definition of bed and breakfast that related to the same, it said the same family. Let me pull it up while I'm looking at it. No more than 1 family is lodged per day. So we did get rid of that.
Yeah, we got rid of that. If I remember correctly, a piece of history, that the reason that boarding house is in there at all is because it's sort of a holdover. The county has a boarding house definition in existence. And it's somebody sort of like did a cut and paste when we invented our ordinances. And that's kind of where it came from, even though there's nothing here that's really a boarding house.
And we did change the definition a little bit to bed and breakfast. It said previously the host family lives on the premises, and change that to Commissioner Ludwig had suggested the owner or caretaker lives on the premises. So I think that came up at the previous meeting or the joint meeting. So that's included in the definition.
Henry, did that answer your question enough to move on?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so would anyone like to make a motion to approve 2021-01?
Yeah, so I mean, as a clarification, to approve the resolution 2021-01, we're moving this forward to the council for their public hearing. Is that right, John?
Correct. Yeah, it's actually a recommendation to council, and they may
Yeah,
make
okay.
changes if they desire.
Okay.
I
I make a motion that we approve P and Z resolution 2021-01 regarding the changes to the Jerome zoning ordinance.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So I move that we approve the resolution 2021 oh, I'm sorry. Let me
Wait,
make
wait,
sure
wait.
everyone's in agreement here.
Call the
Point of-
question.
point of order.
Yeah.
You call the question.
So I'm gonna call the question first. Is everyone that approves 2021-01, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so now I can say that we move to, or it is approved. It was unanimous approval
Of the resolution.
of resolution 2021-.
21. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Moving right along.
Okay, work session. Oh, yeah. Okay, do you want to talk about this, John? Temporary signs?
Yeah, thank you. So item number 5 is a work session, and I know we've talked about this before, and I know you guys are tired of it, but we have some additional information, and we've had some additional discussions with our attorney about temporary signs, what we can and can't do. The primary reason we're changing or looking to change this ordinance regarding signage has a lot to do with the Supreme Court case in which temporary signs, we cannot regulate content. So essentially all temporary signs have to be treated the same, whether it's a garage sale sign, a for sale sign, contractor sign, political sign, or so-called free speech sign. They all have to be treated the same. Now we can prohibit temporary signs entirely, or certain types of temporary signs. We can say no balloons are allowed, or no flying banners, or no electrical temporary signs are allowed. But what we cannot do is we'd have a hard time completely prohibiting all temporary signs. I'm going to mute Jara. I don't know if you can hear us. I'm going to mute you. So we will get into trouble if we tried to completely prohibit all temporary signs because of the real estate signs. So real estate agents aren't going to be too happy if we take away their ability to post for sale signs. What we can do is we can add restrictions on size, height, setbacks, etc. So that was new information to me after discussing that with the attorney. He said, yes, we can absolutely add restrictions. And I did look through codes in several other locations. It seems that a 10-foot setback is fairly common for temporary signs. Now that may not be appropriate in all situations, especially if you have a 0-foot setback. So I've added some language, suggested some language that we actually state it's 10 feet, or if your house is closer than 10 feet to the street, or the structure is closer to 10 feet than 10 feet to the street, then you can go to that setback. So if you had a structure of 5 feet, for example, then you can use 5 feet. Otherwise, the standard would be 10 feet. I did include a whole list of prohibited signs. And if you go to the bottom of page 2, you'll see that list got significantly longer than the last time we looked at it. I was looking at the Gilbert ordinance and a couple other sign ordinances, and decided now's the time to add these types of signs that we don't want. So I'm hoping that you guys have had a chance to kind of look through some of those signs. A lot of them were already in our ordinance, but located rather than in a list of prohibited items, they were located in the definitions in different places. So I've tried to consolidate those all into one sections. Things like flying banners, inflatable signs. I learned there's a lot of different types of signs. They, in some cases, they're called them feather signs. You'll see them at sporting events where it looks like a giant feather. So I've added some definitions and some information clarifying what we consider types of flying banners, that those types of signs aren't allowed. We did talk a little bit about flags last time, and Commissioner Shull had a good suggestion that your flagpole shouldn't be any taller than, if it does fall, it should fall on your own property.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the same requirement for antennas. That's where that idea comes from.
where was that from?
Antennas, it's already in our ordinance for
I was going to
radio.
say it's already in our ordinance. I didn't realize that at the time we were discussing it. So, so no need to change that. Let me see if there are any other items I wanted to point out. So the main thing is in residential zones, I've suggested a 10-foot setback or less if your structure is closer to the street. I've also suggested that the height and size of those signs be limited. I did talk to a couple local real estate agents, and I did send them copies of the agenda and staff report, but I see they're not on the call tonight. I did talk to a couple real estate agents, and they said the standard size real estate sign plus one or two of those little writers that they put on the bottom that say in escrow would all fit under, what did I come up with on size?
6 square feet, 5, what is the?
Yeah, I think I ended up with 5 square feet.
5.
Currently rather, there's different size signs listed in our ordinance. The largest one is allowed for 6 square feet. So previously we were talking about 6 square feet. I don't think it makes too much difference whether it's 6 square feet or 5 square feet, but I wanted to mention that I'd suggested restricting the signs to 5 square feet, no closer than 10 feet to the street, and no higher than 4 feet tall for those types of temporary signs. And then I did look, I'm struggling with how to address flags a little bit. I think we have to be cautious about including flags as a temporary sign. I think a flag is its own entity. People can have an American flag and they can have an American flag and an Arizona flag. Some people obviously are posting flags with their particular political candidate or other information on them. So I think we need to really look at flags as being a separate type, a separate category.
Can they be smaller? Can the flags be smaller than a Prescott Valley car dealership at least?
We can restrict the size of flags. I don't think there's any issue with doing that. But I went on Amazon just to see what the most common flag size was, and it looks like a common flag size is a 3x5, so that's 15 square feet. So in the suggested language on flags, I have flags not to exceed 16 square feet, and the height of flag shall be no taller than the building. So you can't have the flagpole mounted on your roof with a flag on top of it. So take a look at the flag section. Be interested if you have any thoughts, suggestions on what we could do differently. I do think we should count flags separately in terms of square footage from the temporary signs. I think that covers most of the changes. Again, I've included a red line version of the text so you can see how that would actually look in the ordinance. Oh, I do want to mention that in terms of temporary signs, I did include language in the both the residential and the commercial that the maximum square footage of your temporary signs is the sum of all of your temporary signs. So you can have 4 1 square foot temporary signs, or you can have 1 or 5 square feet, or you can have 1 5 square foot temporary sign. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments about that?
No, it all looks good to me. It looks like John did some good work here. That's what I think.
Yeah, a lot of.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I'm kind of sad about is rotating signs. I think the one barber pole in the commercial district that should go around, should be allowed to go around,
Oh, wow.
but that's okay. I don't want to rewrite the whole thing for that one sign. So they put up their barber pole and agreed to have it not turned some time ago. So I guess they've worked through that problem. So, but I feel kind of sad that it's like an old timey mid-century barber pole sign. It should go around, but
Hmm.
that's okay. I can move on.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, please.
John, this question's to you.
Mhm.
Wrong button. There we go. Is there any distinguishing between flags on businesses for their advertisement and the American flag or a political statement? Is there any distinguishment?
So no distinguishment in terms of content. So I'll start with that part. So whether it says for sale or Mike Harvey's the greatest commissioner of all time, it doesn't matter. They can say whatever they want to say, including that.
Okay.
So, but what we can do, and what I did do, is treat the size and restrictions on temporary signs differently in different zones. So the residential zones have a maximum of 5 square feet, but the commercial zones have a larger, let me see if I can find that. The commercial zones have a larger standard in terms of size. I think it's currently 8 square feet. Sorry, I'm flipping to it.
Well,
Yeah,
if it's used for advertisement of the business, does that fall under advertising signs instead of flags? I mean, I was just curious.
No, that's a really good question. So the difference is, yeah, it is 8 square feet in the commercial and industrial, as opposed to 5 square feet in the residential. The difference is I tried to include a definition of what is temporary. So a real estate sign, I think most of us agree, is temporary. A banner attached to the side of your building that says sale, sale this weekend. Those things are temporary. Just before I got here, there was a Lance, maybe Jessamine and Henry will remember that there was an amendment to the zoning ordinance to address basically for sale signs, temporary banners in the commercial zones. So I tried to leave most of that intact. If the sign is related to a specific event, and I was copying some of this language from the Gilbert ordinance since they went through this whole Supreme Court case. If the sign was related to a specific specific event, then the sign has to be removed within several days. Looking for it within a certain number of days after the sign, after the event that it's advertising. So something like somebody's having a garage sale, then 2 or 3 days after the event, they have to take down that sign. Now in the commercial district, I didn't really fiddle with it because the way it's currently written is no business may display a temporary sign for more than 90 days per calendar year or 45 consecutive days. So I left that in place. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Harvey?
Well, I just figured if you had a sign that said Eat Joe's Barbecue hanging over your place would fall under commercial signs. I was just wondering if we had addressed it at all.
Yeah, so
Thank
that's,
you.
yeah, I think, that's a really good point. That's what we would consider a temporary sign. And they would be allowed to have that for up to 45 consecutive days under the existing ordinance. So I did not want to take that away. The real challenge with the commercial temporary signs is I'm not going to come along and put a Sharpie on it and date the sign the day it went up. So oftentimes I don't know if it's been up for more than 45 consecutive days and 90 days per calendar year. So that's a little bit of a challenge, but mostly my experience with sign enforcement is if you talk to the business owners, they're willing to voluntarily comply. It's one of those things we just have to keep on top of.
Thank you.
Okay. So there isn't any action that we're taking here, is there, John? We're just discussing.
Yeah, just a work session. Any directions, suggested changes, if you think I missed anything or you wanted to add additional types of prohibited signs or decided that we want to allow rotating signs, those are the kinds of things that I'd like to know now. And then I'll come back. I actually have to advertise this just like we did with the previous item on the agenda. We'll have to advertise this as a public hearing, and then we'll have a recommendation go to council. But if this looks pretty close, I'll come back at the next meeting with a public hearing and a resolution. We do have at least one member of the public who may be interested in participating as well. So be sure to
Yes, I
ask.
see. Wendy, would like to say something?
I want to say something too.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just had a question. So, I would be interested as I get closer to the Cuban Queen opening, having a sign that says, coming soon, and maybe has the plan. What would that be considered? Is that within the, hi Karina, is that within the 90 days?
Yes. So Wendy, first of all, I think you're having some video, your connection's not that great. If you could turn off your video and we could just go with audio, it might be a little easier to
Sure.
hear you. So
Sure.
if you wouldn't mind just asking your question again.
Okay, can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. So I would be interested in a temporary sign as I get closer to the opening of the Cuban Queen, that says coming soon, maybe has the website, some pictures of the approved plan, something like that. So what would be the best way to go about having that up the longest? Like, so I heard you say something about 90 days. And so obviously, like, if this build is going to take us longer than that, so if how could I have this up longer? Like, is it 90 days and then I take it down for 30, or how could I do that?
Excellent question. Madam Chair, may I answer?
Yes, please.
So good question. The way the ordinance is currently, under the current ordinance, you can have that sign up for, okay, I had it in front of me, flipping back and forth. So under the current ordinance, under the commercial district, it, like I said, as I mentioned earlier, they did address this I think a couple of years ago, just before I got here. So you can have it for a temporary sign for 45 consecutive days. And we've allowed and encouraged businesses while they're getting their permanent sign in place that they can have that temporary sign that says Cuban Queen coming soon. You have up to 45 consecutive days. Again, the problem I have is I'm not going to go by with a Sharpie and date it, but you do have 45 days, and then you can take it down and then put it up for another 45 days for a total maximum of 90 days. Does that answer your question, Wendy?
Yeah, so that's in a calendar year.
Correct, in a calendar year.
Okay,
So
thank
if
you.
you
So if I time it right,
I was going to say, I already know how you think. If you time it right, you get 90 days before the end of December, and then you get another 90 days in the following year.
Thank you.
But you're going to have that thing built by next month, so that won't be
That's true.
an issue.
Thank you.
Ms. Kays, did you have a comment? I saw you had a question.
Yeah. Is there something in our ordinance regarding campaign signs and having to be down after a certain number of days after the end of an election? Is that?
In most of those things related to campaign signs, political signs, candidate signs have been removed. So all temporary signs are treated the same. If the sign does pertain to an event, like an election, then a certain number of days after the election or after the event, if it's a garage sale or something like that, then a sign has to be removed. I'm trying to find that language.
I'm talking specifically about elections. I know because of content, that's a touchy thing. We don't, touch
Right.
content. But I
Right.
thought campaign signs had a separate limitation.
There's some state law for state right of way for signs.
Okay, so that's just in state right away.
Right, the signs that you see when you drive to Cottonwood and are over at the traffic circles and that kind of stuff, they're in their own separate world. That's a state right of way sign. And
Okay.
they've got their own requirements for being taken down.
So someone in Jerome could keep a campaign sign up, or doesn't matter. As long as it's on their private property.
Right. The idea is if it pertains to a particular event, they're supposed to remove it. But if it just says, I support the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or Libertarian Party, then they can keep it up.
They
They
can
can
leave
keep it up, as long as it meets the setbacks and height, et cetera.
that as long as it's not on the state right of way.
And
Right.
yeah, or town right away.
Henry, go ahead, please.
Well, I think there's specificity in this, in the Arizona revised statutes pertaining to the campaign signs. I mean, granting the poster the right to place them in the right of way, but I believe there's also specificity with regards to when those signs have to come down. And I think there's some days specific
Yes.
inside of the Arizona revised statutes that allow, you know, a campaign to place a sign in the highway right of way. So as far as campaign signs needing to come down, I think there's specificity in the Arizona revised statutes, but I'm not sure.
That's correct. No, you've stated that correctly. So the direction that I was really hoping to get from the commission tonight is primarily the issues that are going to be concerning to some people would be the maximum size of a temporary sign in the residential area, the maximum height, and the setback. So if you have any thoughts on those things, or if you think we nailed that, and also, you know, if you had any suggestions, thoughts, ideas about how we treat flags, because I think what's going to happen, honestly, is a lot of these temporary signs, people are just going to turn them into flags and hang them from their flagpole on their building. But I don't want to restrict the ability of somebody to fly a US flag or an Arizona flag on their building.
Mike, go ahead, please.
My understanding that campaign signs according to state law has to be removed within 10 days after the election.
And I've had this discussion with our attorney. That is true for signs that are in the right of way. But we regulate, as a town, we regulate signs on private property. So that's correct when it comes to signs on in the right of way.
Thank you.
So just a note for the minutes. I see that Commissioner Chuck Rongberger has entered the Zoom meeting.
Sorry, I'm late. I wasn't watching the clock.
Yeah, hi Chuck. You were watching the clock, but you're in a different time zone.
Yeah, you got it.
You're on California
Jerome
time.
zone.
You're on California time, or watching the inauguration.
Okay, do we want to have any more discussion on this?
There was one thing that may be new to our commission that I would like to mention, if you indulge me for one more minute, is most codes have something called a clear vision triangle. And if you read through the red line section of the ordinance, you saw that I added that to the definition. So if you do happen to be at a corner, for example, most ordinances will restrict the placement of items in that corner, so that you don't have a potential traffic hazard as you're trying to make a right or left turn. So I've added a definition. I basically copied the one from Gilbert. I did look at Cottonwood and Sedona, and I believe they're very similar. So that's new to our code. I couldn't find it anywhere else in the code, but that's a pretty common item that most codes have.
Yeah, I saw that. I like it. I don't have any complaint what you've come up with here.
Great.
Mhm. So great.
So,
Okay.
Okay, well, if everyone's complete, then I'm gonna move on. Item 6. Vote amendments related to administrative approval of small projects. John?
Thank you very much. This has been a long time coming.
I
Item-
talked about this one 10 times. I say, let's just move it ahead. I'm done.
We don't, the problem with this one is we still have some disagreement on some of the projects. So what I was hoping to do tonight is get agreement on the ones that we do have consensus on. We did discuss this at the joint meeting. The minutes are included in your packet from that joint meeting. So I think and we did have, by the way, we did have a small little committee meeting with 2 council members and 2 P&Z commissioners, where we discussed some of these things as well. So if I've missed anything from that meeting, for those of you that were participating in that, please let me know. But I think for the most part, there's substantial agreement that anything that is repair and replace with similar or like materials, that's not a concern. And we may even want to include that as a specific exemption. I would like to add to the list of exemptions anything that's landscape related. So planting of bushes, trees, things like that. but not including structures. Landscape structure like a gazebo or a patio or something like that would be separate. Of course, a shed, that would be separate. So I did want to add a new category called exemptions, and there may be additional exemptions that we can add to that over time. And then the category 2 is, I think, really what we're here to talk about are things that should be and could be approved administratively. Now, just a reminder that just because they're approved administratively doesn't mean that they still don't need to meet our setback requirements, our coverage requirements, our design requirements. In fact, some of these may not need site plan review, but they still may need review by our design review board. And I do plan to bring this item to our design review board meeting for the February meeting for their input as well. But added some basic things. I think everybody's in agreement that paint, stain, if somebody wants to change the color of their building, that shouldn't require board approval. I've asked several people, when would we not approve somebody's paint color? We've all seen houses in Jerome that are fairly, let's say, garishly colored. But somebody described to me that stripes and polka dots are the only thing that wouldn't be approved by our design review board when it comes to paint and stain. And I'm not even sure that's the case. I mean, paint is temporary. So if you do want to specifically prohibit stripes and polka dots, now's the time to speak up.
Yeah, historically, you find pink and purple houses both. So it's not like you could actually pick a color that's you couldn't defend.
Yeah. Now I understand.
That reason.
I live in Sedona, and I understand that Sedona basically has a book that you can pull through, that they pull out, and you can go through, and they have paint colors that are approved, and they try and keep everything in the greens and browns and tans.
Oh yeah, that's Sedona. They have 400 shades of beige there.
Yeah, exactly. If that's something we want to implement, now's the time to speak up. But in general, I think we've that ship has sailed. That people like the variety and diversity of colors, and since I've been here anyway, in any case, we have not had a project where somebody's proposed to paint their house where we've turned it down or made any changes to their proposed color. I'd like to also add concrete or flat work. Marianne Barr's house, she had 2 strips of concrete going up her driveway, and we had to run that through the design review board to get approval for that. But if there are sort of concrete related things that are, let's say, taller than a certain height, taller than 12 inches, then maybe, if somebody wants to build a concrete structure, I think that would be a different item that we would not exempt. Basic window and door replacement, you can't really force people to spend several $1,000s to recreate a perfect window that was basically the same thing that would have been put in 100 years ago. So we've been allowing people to replace windows with modern windows. Stair replacement where there's no change in the footprint of the stairs. Awnings, signs, I know that might have some interest at the design review board, so I'll be discussing that with them. And in terms of ground level decks and patios, I believe the building code has a standard. I'll double check with our building inspector, but it's either 12 inches or 18 inches.
I think it's 18.
Is it 18?
Yeah.
That anything less than 18 inches is exempt from a building permit. They just consider it like a concrete patio. Fences, walls less than a certain height. I've suggested 48 inches tall because that's consistent with the building code. The building code doesn't require a permit if it's less than 48 inches tall. We did have a lot of discussion about that and whether that was appropriate because we do get a lot of walls in Jerome, and they are often retaining walls, and they potentially have an impact on the neighbor. So I think there is still a little bit of discussion potentially on the walls issue. I would like to include when people change roof color and materials. For example, we get a lot of people that are changing out their composition roofs to metal roofs, which is absolutely great. But we do require them to go currently through the design review board. So those are the main categories that I think there's mostly consensus on, the main items rather. Category 3, I think there's not agreement on. I think that's split about 50-50. Small sheds, building code does not require a building permit for a shed that's 120 square feet or less. So that's a pretty good sized shed if you think about it, 10 by 12. So I think people would like to see that continue to be part of the typical site plan review. And then any sort of additions, modifications, probably anything that is commercial should still go through site plan review, design review. So I wanted to get a little input on the items that I've included in those categories, and then I can come back at the next meeting with a red line version of the ordinance, and we can advertise that as a public hearing. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Question, do sheds have setbacks the same as other structures?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, they are, they're not the same setback though. I believe
But
sheds have, sheds can have a lesser setback than the primary structure.
But they are subject to setbacks. So you
Absolutely.
can kind of tuck them in, hide them a little bit.
Yeah. One of the problems with exempting sheds less than a certain size is people will get the idea that, well, if it doesn't require site plan review, then I can just put it wherever I want. So we just, that might be something that we need to consider if we are going to exempt sheds.
Right, you want to think about not putting them in the front yard.
Yeah.
Couldn't we just take items 13, 14, 15 in category 3 and move them down into category 4 and call it done?
If that's the commission's decision, be happy to do that. I would love to see us get at least these category 2 items that I've listed, kind of out of the way, and then we can start talking about those in the future. Councilmember Moore had a good suggestion that maybe some of these things I have in category 3 or even category 4 that we hold off until we have the design guidelines approved, and then we can come back and revisit that.
Okay, I can see that.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Any thoughts on walls or some of the other items that are in the category 2?
Oh, sorry, Mike. I was looking at the list.
Looking at the
Walls-
packet.
Thank you. Would walls, let's see, walls 48 inches tall, would that fall under design and review?
Yeah, they currently require design review just like a fence.
But you could make approval and send it to design and review, or after design and review back.
Well, currently walls, sorry,
No, go ahead.
currently walls only require design review because it's not like a structure that requires a setback. So you can
Okay,
have a
thank you.
wall right on your property line. Again, these would still have design standards associated with them. So you couldn't just put any wall up. You'd still have to meet design standards. And I would add something to the ordinance that basically said the zoning administrator has the ability to basically bump up any item that they consider controversial in nature. So if somebody has a 48-inch or 40-inch wall that's 8 feet long supporting their property that's starting to slough off, great. But if somebody comes in from the asylum and says, I want a 400-foot long 48-inch wall, we may want to run that through the design review board.
Thank you.
Rosa, go ahead.
Yes, I just want clarification on, you said something about ground level decks and patios, and that anything less than 18 inches doesn't need a permit
Under the building code,
under the building code.
right? But not currently under our ordinance.
You mean 18 inches thick or wide or
Tall off the existing grade,
tall? Okay,
above
Thank
the existing grade, which is in many ways in Jerome is very difficult because nearly every single lot in Jerome has more than 18 inches of slope to it. So this would be only a few cases that would be applied.
thank you.
I see Commissioner Shaw has a comment question.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm waiting for Justin to tell me I can talk.
Go ahead.
I said, a condition on window replacement. If you put a condition on stairs, say no change to footprint, condition on deck, say it can't be higher than 18 inches. I put a condition on windows that would say that you can do administrative approval as long as, I want to say, you're at least going to simulate the old look, right? So that means you can use a aluminum clad frame or, whatever modern technique,
Mhm.
but same style of window. If it's a French casement, you can replace the French casement. If it's a double hung, you can replace a double hung and so on. The intention here is to avoid having a door that looks like it belongs in a trailer house, or a window, that doesn't, look right.
Right.
All right, right. So, I have no problem if you want to do a double hung window, as long as you put a double hung window in, right? If you're going to change it to some big, huge, 16 square foot glass picture front living room window thing from the 50s,
Yeah.
then we need to talk about it, right? So
So,
I'd say my condition of administrative approval would be window has to be same size and
Yeah, I had that same kind of question also.
same.
The window opening.
that's a good point. So if it's a door or a window,
Yeah, door or window has got to be the same size. I don't want to have somebody take out a regular, 30-inch wide door and turn it into a 62-inch wide thing, 10 feet
Right.
high or something bizarre, right? So basically, same style and type that was, at least simulating the same
that
Same.
makes sense.
materials and same size and style.
And this is, there's some good points about design. I know I've had discussions with people about the internal, what do they call them? The divided lights that some windows have.
Yeah.
And that was relatively common, years ago, and is not so common today. If somebody is coming in with a window replacement that traditionally had separate divided lights and they just want to put in a new window, is that the kind of thing that would be appropriate? Or do you think they would have to find a window with the divided lights?
Well, I think that should go to design review, right? They can make a change if they
Yeah.
want, but for administrative approval, they've got to match what's there.
I
Right.
agree.
Just like the staircase being in the same footprint. Staircase being the same footprint. If you want to change the footprint, then you got to go through the boards.
I agree. I think that makes sense.
That sounds smart to me.
And then I had a question about fences. Is there a height that has to come before the board? Or is there a height before it doesn't? Like,
All fences have to go through the design review board. So P&Z doesn't typically see fences unless it's
Right.
part of the larger project.
I meant for administrative stuff, if it's a 3 feet fence, like what if it's an 8-foot fence?
Right. So our fencing allows you to go up to 6 feet and 3 feet, but I believe it's 3 feet in the front yard. I'm not currently looking at it, but I can confirm that next time we
Yeah,
come back.
I think the maximum is 6, in the backyard or whatever. I don't know
Yeah.
what to call it if it's over 6 feet.
The tricky issue with fences that I've had before, just in past jobs, is if you and your neighbor have a topographical change of say 2 feet between them, your fence might be 6 feet on your side, but it's sitting on a 2-foot wall, and then it's 8 feet on your neighbor's side. So we may need to consider how we address fences when there's associated with a wall as well.
Yes, Mike?
I have a question. Would it also depend on what the material is the fence is made out of? If you're using half of your rock wall fence on the outside that's 4 feet tall and the inside's 2 feet of retaining, doesn't that require engineering or some kind of approval separate than a picket fence or metal fences we have around Jerome?
It could, and that would be a building code requirement. So P&Z or DRB might approve a fence that is 6 feet tall sitting on top of a 4-foot wall. Then building code might say, hey, we need to get that engineered. So I guess the answer is it depends.
Thank you.
I was going to look up that fence requirement.
Can I ask a question? I don't know where to raise my hand. This is Jera.
Hi, Jerry. Yeah, please go ahead.
I was curious about the fence. So it can go right up to the road and not have any like room on the road, like the side. So the fence can go right up to like a road. There's no setback on a fence?
So Madam Chair, can I?
Yes, please answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared, for your comment. Appreciate it. That's an excellent question. So in the front yard, the fence or wall can go all the way up to the property line, but be no taller than 3 feet tall. But once you get past the front yard, you can have a fence of 6 feet tall.
Okay, but I was wondering about like, so it goes right to the road, so there's no
Right.
like room on the side of the road. So to pull over or anything, so they could be right. Okay,
So assume, for example, your house is set back, let's say 10 feet, and you've got a
Uh-huh.
fence, between you and your neighbor, whether it's the uphill or the downhill neighbor, 6 feet tall until you get to that 10-foot setback, and then you've got to drop that fence to 3 feet tall going out to the
Okay.
street. And you can go all
Okay.
the way, you can go all
you
the
can
way
go
to
all the way to the street to the pavement.
no, not to the pavement.
Okay.
Unless the pavement includes the property line, you can go all the way to the property line.
Okay, so the property line set back from the road, how far usually?
That's an excellent question. We don't know in many cases.
Okay.
You can't assume, in Jerome, you can't assume that the property line is located
Like a
at the
certain
edge.
walking area?
Yeah, it varies a lot. I've seen property lines that actually go through the center of buildings in Jerome.
I was gonna say, you can't assume that the property line is even, doesn't go through your house. Never mind your fence.
Yeah, you might remember the 146 Juarez, the gentleman that was building the deck. Well, we did find his property corners. His property corner is actually in the middle of the drivable surface of the street. So theoretically, he could extend a 3-foot fence out to the center of the drivable surface of the roadway. But
Okay.
in Jerome,
So
people
it's not
realize
set really, I mean, but so they can literally go to the pavement, but there's a bit of a setback somewhat.
well, they can go to wherever their front property line is. So
Okay,
if there's question, like there was on the example of Juarez, if there's a question, we ask them to get a survey or demonstrate
Mhm.
that they've found the property corners so that we can figure out where the property line really
Okay.
is. But if, for example, where your house is located, well, they did a survey, the property next door, and I know the property
Uh-huh.
above it also did a survey. So we know where those pins are. But
Okay.
in a lot of areas, it's primarily assumed to be the back of the sidewalk or the back of the street. But if
yeah,
there is
because on North Drive, it's hard to say where exactly the road is, especially when it becomes dirt. Yeah.
Yeah, in the 18 North, which is just down from you,
Uh-huh.
their property corner, the lowest property corner in the front is actually in the drivable surface of the street as well. There's
Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, the point. It goes
yeah,
out into the
it's actually a little
road.
triangle. So that's not
Uh-huh.
unusual in Jerome, but just to answer the question, in general, the front yard, you can have a 3-foot tall fence all the way up to your
Okay,
property
so there's
line.
no setback. Okay, so you can be right up to.
Yeah, a good example is I think it's 860 Hampshire, between Nancy Smith's house and the house that's downhill from her. They built a new fence, 3-foot tall fence in the front property, so you can kind of see what that looks like. In the back, they could do 6 feet, but when they came out to the front, they had to reduce it to 3 feet in height.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure. Thank you for
Okay.
participating.
Uh-huh.
Okay, is there any more discussion in the category 2? No, everybody feels good with a little bit of additions.
Good. If everybody's comfortable with that, I'll do a red line for our next meeting and bring that back, and maybe we can knock out the temporary signs as well as the administrative approvals and get that on to council.
Okay. Do we want to talk about category 3 a little bit more in depth?
I'm happy to leave it up in the air, like John had mentioned.
Okay.
Or roll it into 4 and call it done. I think if we want to leave it open until we get our historical survey, that's fine. Leave it where it is, basically.
Anybody else like to chime in on that? Yeah, go ahead. Mike.
I believe it is category 3, 15, modifications. I don't see any reason to wait on that one. That one should be no problem at all. And the county standard for a shed is 120 square feet. Unless we have special conditions that need addressed, I don't see a problem. I don't know, I'm new to this. That's my thinking.
So just to clarify, your suggestion was to actually add that into category 2, number 15?
13, 14, and 15. I don't see that it's an issue. We've discussed this, the fact that it has to have setbacks. I don't see where there needs to be an exception anywhere. But like I said, I'm new at this, so, but I don't see any reason not to move ahead on those. Leaving us free to go to category 4.
Anyone else have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, either way, that was my intention when I talked about it, was to roll them into 4, to make them review. That would be more conservative and safer. Mike said, let's roll them back into 2. I don't care about that either. That's fine. It's just, but I guess that's the point of why they're in category 3. They're in future consideration, because John didn't know which way to push them. Do I push them into 4? Do I push them into 2? I don't know. I'm not sure how to get to the bottom of that. So I don't know how to decide.
Lance, I agree with you.
Would you like to say something, Henry?
Yes, please. It seems as though if you just move them up to number 2, wouldn't that create less administrative burden for Mr. Knight and the building inspector
And the boards.
and the boards?
Yeah. The only
Our input, it seems consistently across the, pardon the pun, the board, is that we're all comfortable moving those 3 items up to number 2 and allow the administration of the municipality to make those decisions and get the building permits issued.
Yeah, I am. I'm comfortable moving them into 2. I only suggested to put them into 4 because that was more conservative, right? Gives more people to look at it, and so forth, so on. Personally, I'm comfortable moving them all into 2.
My issue is, are we helping the municipality administer the ordinance by giving Mr. Knight and his associate the ability to make these decisions and go and allow that particular property owner to go to building permit?
Well, that's good too. I'm more interested in helping the taxpayers and the citizens of Jerome. If we don't need to burden them with paying more money and taking more time, that's good too. So
I agree with that sentiment as well.
And we do have the ability to still leave it with design review approval. So we could take these 2 items. I think 15 should be in category 2, but we could take 13 and 14 and say that doesn't require site plan review by P&Z, but we're still going to require them to go through design review. Or we could.
Yeah.
So that would still save a lot of time and effort by both staff and the applicants and be kind of a middle ground.
Yeah, that's kind of good. I like the idea of even the shed. The 120 square foot, like you pointed out, is a pretty big shed. If it goes for design review, so they can make sure it's not made out of steel and mirrors, that's probably a fine idea.
Yeah, and you think about a shed that's 120 square feet on a really steep sloping lot. Well, pretty soon they're going to be adding walls and modifying this, a lot of things around it. So
yeah.
I think it may be appropriate to keep that as administrative approval. If we do keep that administrative approval, that it still goes to DRB for their final sign off.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
Mike has his hand up.
go ahead, Mike, please.
Just for clarification, now that you mentioned that, do height restrictions still apply to sheds as it does everything else?
Absolutely.
You're right. On my yard, I'd have to have a 16-foot front wall just to get the darn thing built. So I was wondering what height restrictions are involved in that. Still applies the same way?
Yeah, heights
Just for
and setbacks.
clarification.
Yeah, heights and setbacks all the same.
Yeah, sheds. I'm not looking at it right now, but sheds do have a.
I think they got a smaller setback, but you still have to meet the height requirements for any structure.
Yeah, accessory buildings can be up to 5 feet within 5 feet, up to 5 feet from the rear and side property line. And I have to find it in here somewhere else, but I believe there's a height restriction on sheds. I was thinking off the top of my head, it was 15 feet, but there is a height restriction on sheds. So you can't just.
Yeah, there's something lower than the standard 35 foot for a residence.
Exactly, or 25. Yeah, so, and those would, I can confirm that when we come back with that next time.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, very good. All right, moving on. Joint meeting follow-up.
It was, I just want to, we just wanted to add, this was actually Ms. Kay's suggestion to add this to the agenda because it's a little difficult sometimes in a large meeting for everybody to say what they wanted to say about any particular items. So we just wanted to give P and Z members an opportunity if there was any additional follow-up from that meeting. The joint meeting, the minutes are included, of course. So there's a lot of detail. I think Rosa did a great job putting these minutes together. So there's a lot of detail in there. So just wanted to give the board the opportunity if there is any additional thoughts, comments about any of the items that we discussed at the joint meeting. We will be returning with discussions about setbacks, appeals process. We will be returning to the board with some additional amendments to the ordinance on that. Mixed use, I think we'll be coming back. It seems like that's a less of priority, but we'll be coming back on the mixed use item. And telecom, we're still ping-ponging it back and forth. I'm not sure exactly where the telecom ordinance is going to land, but at some point this board will have an opportunity to weigh in on the telecom ordinance. Anyway, that's why we added it to the agenda. If there are any additional comments, wanted to give everyone a chance to add to that.
Does anybody have any comments? I was there. I'm good with it.
I left after the Mexican pool issue, so I missed the rest of it.
Oh, I was talking about the joint meeting in
Joint.
December.
That joint meeting. Okay.
No, everyone good? Okay, well, there we go.
It's like Mayor Dillenberg says, all the strong and silent types here on this commission.
Right.
Okay, well then,
Don't hold back.
if everyone's good, yeah, we'll move to some updates.
Great. Item 8 updates. Last official meeting, not including the joint meeting, rather. Last official meeting we had was way back in October. So just added kind of a list of things that have happened since October. We didn't have a whole lot going on at the design review board level. We did have a couple of signs. Everybody's by now probably seen the really cool cornice that they added above the Nellie Bly building. That turned out really well. They actually went through and did some sort of patina to it. It was brand new looking metal. And I came back the next day and somehow they'd got some sort of patina to it. So that turned out really well. Up at the Ground Hotel, they got approval for a fence. The Rombergers had approval for a sign for the building formerly known as Lola, is now Mimi. And the Gallaghers, those troublemakers, they got approval for some paint changes. And I haven't seen it. I need to drive by there and see it. But I understand from Candace, it looks like a new house. So glad to see that get done. That's a good example of an item that we probably should have just approved administratively, but we didn't have a choice. At the council meeting, there's been an ordinance. An ordinance was approved to prohibit recreational marijuana. That was done. We've had a lot of discussions about beekeeping, and Harvey's have been involved in some of those discussions. So we had some discussions about beekeeping and possibly crafting a beekeeping ordinance. I don't know if any of you have been listening to some of the discussions about bees. Just a side note on that. It sounds like the bees that are so-called troublemakers are the Africanized bees. They're a lot more aggressive than our typical European honeybees. And they had suggested that people either don't put out hummingbird feeders or have ones that are so-called bee-proof. I don't think anything's bee-proof, but if you do have problems with bees in the springtime or now, you might consider putting out a bee-proof hummingbird feeder. Also, we had a quote bee expert, Patrick Pines, come join us for the last council meeting. He suggested that we, in areas that we do have problems with bees, that they're primarily after moisture. They're looking for water, and that we set out we actually set out water stations for them so that they will head to the water station instead of heading toward our hummingbird feeders or our glass of soda that we're drinking on the front porch.
Yeah,
And I-
my house, I don't need a bee ordinance. I need paper wasp ordinance. Maybe we can do
Oh
something.
yeah, wasp problems. Well, we send them all when they come over to the Harveys. They send them all up to your house.
Yeah, maybe that's the trick.
Do you? I'm curious. I know that I can see Sage's elbow in the corner. I know that the Harveys put out some water. I'm curious if that had any effect on your bees.
Actually, it didn't.
Oh,
It started
didn't.
out, it was hard to draw them in.
Mhm.
When we finally got them to come in, it wasn't too bad, but they were still aggressive at the feeder in the front. We put it in the backyard. After the rain, they were still aggressive. So I don't see that they're entirely hunting for water, but I do support people putting water out for bees. And I heard how he had recommended it, and I still think it might be a good effort for us to put a water station in our backyards to try and keep them off our front porch.
Yeah, or wherever you want to hang out. I think that's a good idea. So hopefully we can, as we get towards spring, we can get the word out to give your bees some water. We've been talking a lot about COVID restrictions and reopening of town hall for the foreseeable future. Town hall is not going to change in terms of being open to the general public. Something I did want to mention, if you're over, I believe it is 65 or have a pre-existing condition or considered an essential worker, you can sign up to get a COVID vaccination at Spectrum Healthcare, which is kind of near the hospital down by Willard, and I think it's Mingus and Willard. And I signed up today and got an appointment for February 4th. So if you are interested in getting vaccinated and you meet any of those criteria, go ahead and sign up on the Spectrum website. Let's see, on December 1st, we had the joint meeting. I only mentioned that in case any public is participating, because all of you were participating in that meeting. And on December 7th, we had a DRB meeting, some minor changes. We had the deck on Juarez, some windows on School Street, and another example of something that could have been done administratively. There was a sign for Clark Street, 403 Clark Street, for the ghost tour business. And I believe they're now operating. And let's see, 639 Center, they did a change in some of the materials, siding materials and colors at 639 Center. And most of those items would actually potentially be approved administratively in the future. Some additional discussion December 8th about bees again. We did cancel the January 4th DRB meeting due to lack of items. We had a really good discussion about district signs at the January 12th council meeting. They also talked about the Porta Johns and bees again. So if you do have some interest in district signs, I think the direction we've got from the council is they would like us to upgrade and improve those district signs with a map of the town and maybe break the town into districts, and then have a either a flyer or handout with the individual businesses on it. Each one would be numbered, or we've talked about maybe just doing a QR code where you walk up with your cell phone and you click it, and then it'll take you to a map that you can use on your phone. So if you do have any input on district signs, I'd love to hear it. I know at least one of you has a business in the downtown area. And then one thing I did want to mention, it's not listed on the agenda, is we are in that period of time where we will be looking for a new design review board, P&Z, and Board of Adjustment members. So if you do know of anybody who may be interested, the best way to recruit people is to ask somebody. So if you know somebody who you think might be interested, please ask them to get in touch with me, or maybe ask a council member to ask them to volunteer. And we will be losing at least unfortunately, two of our P&Z members coming up. Our chairman, Madam Chair, is termed out, as well as Commissioner Vincent. So unfortunately, we'll be down to 3 members. Any comments,
Yeah,
thoughts, questions on any of the updates?
I have one. As far as the soda machine for Paul and Jerry's, I didn't listen to this meeting and I have not read minutes or anything. So I'm asking.
What happened?
The soda machine at Paul and Jerry's, was there any discussion about the sidewalk encroachment policy on that?
I kept thinking about that and it didn't come up. I didn't bring it up, but I think this is one of the items that we need to add to the sidewalk encroachment policy.
We had
Yeah,
a float machine.
I
They
have-
had- and it-
Sorry,
and we
Lance,
were-
go ahead.
I'm sorry, we had a floating machine in front of Paul and Jerry's and it was removed.
About
Mhm.
about 8 years ago, I understand.
Yeah, yeah, because it was sitting on the sidewalk. I mean, I guess they want to
Madam
put it
Chair?
back. They want to put it back or what?
Yes, but it was denied at council.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
it was, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I know Commissioner Harvey has a comment.
Are
It
you
was,
done there?
it was denied and encroachment was the problem. And that's why it was removed the first time. It used to be underneath by the door. And when it got busy enough, it was moved to the street and found to be encroaching in pedestrian traffic. That was their decision.
The council cited the main reason they cited denying the request was they were concerned about setting a precedence that if we allow soda machines, are we going to allow hot dog stands and ice cream stands and people
Yeah.
selling T-shirts in the park, and what about the liability associated with those things? So I think those are all good questions that we want to raise again when we talk about the sidewalk encroachment policy, because we definitely have things that are commercial in nature that are placed on the sidewalk. They might not be selling an item like a T-shirt or soda, but hostess stands are a good example. Those types of things are currently often placed on the sidewalk. So we'll get back to that. It's just been a lower priority on the list of things that we have going on.
The sidewalk encroachment policy is like my legacy now, crying out.
Well, you can keep pushing that forward, as even with your off the board, we want your input. Don't
I
worry,
think
we are going to do it. Don't worry, we are going to
I
do
think we may need her input later. She might want to re-up.
it. I think she
Yes,
really wants
It's
to.
all very possible. I just got to get through the next couple months of my life.
I think there's a chance she's resigning so she can run for higher office.
Yeah, watch out.
Yeah, watch out.
Okay, is there any other comments on the updates that
We were just given? No? Okay. John, do you have anything else? I see item 9, potential items.
Yeah, just the code amendments that we talked about today. I haven't had any other applications submitted. If you haven't already been paying attention to the council meeting that we had last week, there is some interest in the Mexican pool site. So that should be coming up before the board. Probably not at the February meeting, but you might see something at the March meeting.
Okay. Is there anything else before we adjourn? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Harvey. Oh, hi, Sage.
We've got a comment from Councilmember Harvey. We can't hear you, Sage.
I will not be here all the time, I promise. I was just helping him get through his first Zoom meeting on the computer.
And I thank you, dear.
I am glad to see the team effort there. It's good to see Mike on the Zoom call.
All right, well. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Well, you have to announce item 10 first.
Oh, I didn't even see there was it. Oh, that's the item.
That's the
Item
item
number
to
10,
adjourn.
Adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
Great. All those in favor of adjourning? Say
Aye.
aye, please.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Oh, yes, Rosa.
Point of clarification, it was Lance who motioned, Mike who second?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
I think Henry did it.
It was Henry's second.
Okay, it was Henry.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with Shaul and Vincent.
Okay, perfect.
We can't leave until we agree on this.
Right.
Nobody gets dinner.
Okay, so we had a call for the yays. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, well, then I make the motion that we adjourn this meeting at 7:16 p.m. on the 20th of January,
Thank
2021.
you. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank
Okay.
you, everyone.
Bye.